Kai Edwards, welcome to the Soccer Queens podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Thank you for coming on, and I'm really excited to have you here to be back. This is the first episode I've done in a few weeks. I was just away for my honeymoon, which was absolutely incredible, but I
Congratulations.
definitely yeah, it was fun, and I was actually in Montana in the mountains, so we were shredding it up, snowboarding, so it was really
I saw
fun.
some good pictures out there, so that's
Oh
fun.
yeah, for sure. But, I love doing the podcast interviews and I really just love hearing from other coaches and I miss doing these interviews and I was like I need to interview Kai as the first episode back because you're doing a lot of great work with college soccer players and just incorporating load management into what you do. And I think a lot of coaches now are bought into the idea of strength training as an important piece, but at this point, it's a non negotiable, and then the load management needs to start to come into play. So, before we get into what exactly you're doing on that end of things, where are you coaching now, and how long have you been there, and kind of what's been your journey?
Yeah, I'm here at Southern Utah University in the WAC in Division One, women's soccer, up in the mountains. We're at 6,000 feet, about 20 minutes from a ski resort. Been here for four years now, 4 seasons. Got the job right when COVID hit, so was tasked to turn a program around and couldn't recruit, couldn't go out, couldn't do anything for a year. But before here, I'm from San Pedro in Los Angeles, the peninsula of Los Angeles. Grew up playing multiple sports, taekwondo, karate, soccer, basketball, everything. Actually was rec till 14. Um, I was the 5'1", 190-pound rec kid at eighth grade, and in ninth grade, I was the 6'1", 130-pound fast club kid real quick. So got into it a little more competitively then. Played at San Francisco State and then Sonoma State D2, won a national championship at Sonoma State. Coached club growing up, coached youth when I was 17 and 18 at a junior college. I coached U12s and I always tell people if you want to get into coaching, your first ever club team should have future World Cup players. So I had Whitney Ingen from the 2015 World Cup team and Kristen Press were both my center mids on that U12 team. So that didn't hurt my career. Went on, my first job was Western Washington University as a volunteer, and then went to Sonoma State, my old school, and then Santa Barbara. Then was a head coach at St. Mary's College in the WCC. Um, Back with Julie Ertz and Ashley Hatch and Lynn Williams. It was a lot to deal with. Then was at Arizona State, Michigan, Oakland, Cal, leading to here. Been here for 4 years, signed a 5-year contract. So building roots and growing a program.
Awesome. That is quite the journey, lots of experience. And I just want to ask, like, along the way, how has your view changed on the fitness side of the game? I mean, you've been in this for so long and you've seen technology become more popular. And what made you kind of like get on board with changing your ways?
Yeah, they always kind of say like either necessity or your own vision. Probably more necessity. When I was at St. Mary's, I was there from '09 to 14 for 6 seasons, and it was my first job. I was 28 years old, and I'm coaching against Jerry Smith and Jen Rockwood and Tim Ward at Pepperdine, and I'm like, well, just work hard. Like I had no other solution, so we just ran hard, and there's no rhyme or reason. There was, Tuesday, you didn't work as hard yesterday. Let's just run hard today or do a competitive drill today. So sometimes when you have no solutions, you go back to what you grew up on, which was, just compete and be a competitor. And then you realize those programs, ADA, USD, and Portland, and all of them, they're like, well, we're doing that and doing it with thought, so we're going to be better. Right. So when I went to Arizona State with Kevin Boyd, they had Catapult, so learned a little more about it scientifically. And then when I was at Michigan with Greg Ryan, our former national team coach, I learned a lot because he used to prepare for World Cup games and Olympics and stuff like that, and can't push me a ham every single day, even though her and Brandy want to be. So started to see it a little more done there. And then I ended up getting my master's in sports coaching, education, pedagogy, emphasis in soccer, and did research papers on cold water immersion and recovery and scientific approaches to micro and macro cycling and all the cool buzzwords. And then I started, I never wanted to lose the side of me from San Pedro, from the docks of Los Angeles. We're going to work, but I started learning I can actually push them harder if I understood what their bodies are capable of and when they're capable of doing it. So it was almost selfishly learning it. I ended up finding ways to maximize performance. I was blessed to coach at some quality soccer clubs, Sereno in Phoenix, Mustang in NorCal, Nationals in Michigan, where we had national team players. So learning how to get them ready for national team cycles and training loads and World Cups, like it became a necessity if you wanted your student athletes to be prepared to perform at the highest level.
It's a lot of studying and really educating yourself as a coach on top of, like, planning your practices and just, like, learning what data to analyze. What are some things you're looking at from the technology side of things to plan your practice week?
Yeah. And just so you know, I'm always looking down to write down the question. I'm old, I
Yeah, I
forget
got
stuff.
I got my notes too, so we're on the same boat.
um, yeah, so some of the data we look at, and what I learned when I was at Michigan, because Michigan has a lot of bells and whistles, is I mean, you can easily get analysis by paralysis, and it has too much information. So I started to learn, and Greg Ryan was great at it. It was like, all right, we have these 100 metrics. These are the three that matter to us, right? Like, don't even look at the other 97K. Like, it'll confuse you. And he was right. So some of our data points we use beyond pulse. So we use distance traveled and intensity at which that distance is traveled, high intensity running and not. Um, Depending on the position, so they have a stat called active participation, which is basically when you start jogging, it starts calculating. So we use that for our strikers. So they're working on getting back into position when our team is defending and the ball's behind them. So they're actively looking to get in good spots. I really don't use heart rate that much, only for outliers. If someone's too high, rarely anyone's too low, but too high. But then we go back and look at what's their load off the field, everything from nutrition to education to stressors. So heart rate, we look more for the outliers. Distance and intensity, I think I look at the most when doing it. And then we use that with Soccer Pulse and video to create um, I've always said the data and the analysis is to confirm or debunk what you thought was going to happen. So we're going to run a training. I think it's going to be at 5,000 meters at this intensity with this active participation and get this quality and whatever. Well, when I look back at Beyond Pulse and the metrics and I look at the video, did I get what I wanted? If I did, great. If I didn't, why not? And what then I go back and analyze variables: size of field, number of balls, number of people on the field, subs, time of exercise. Right. So I go back through, but what I've learned in my time is when I first started, I did that, but I used every single metric there was. So of course, when you use 20 metrics, you're going to be wrong somewhere, right? So I started going back and like, all right, this is where I want our distance, our average distance for the week or for an individual. This is what I want our active participation to be and in total time duration, right? It's always looking at variables and then your controllables within the variables. And then looking at video and Soccer Pulse and asking the student athlete questions. How does your body feel after this? Why? Why not? And sometimes, oh, I'm tired. Cool. Oh, what else is going on? Well, I had 3 midterms. I didn't sleep last night. I didn't eat well. Okay, well, everything has a context to it. So being aware of those contexts when analyzing data um, can help tell a story on preparing student athletes.
That's a really great breakdown, and it's funny you said, paralysis by analysis, and I think when all these technologies came out, everyone was excited, "Oh, we have so many numbers and data," but it's like, how do we even interpret this? Where do we start? And I like that you do look at the intensity of the runs, and usually like that's where the most injury risk occurs. So I'm just curious, in the your time at Southern Utah, what has the injury situation be? Has things gotten a little bit better since you've been using this technology?
Yep. So since I've been here, we've had two ACL injuries. They were the same kid, and they were stepping in a hole on a field. So that's it. Sucks for her, but we we haven't had, knock on wood, a non-contact without a field being the context of an injury. Um, we average 1 to 2 muscle injuries a year. Um, of those 1 or 2, usually both of them came in at a lower fitness level than should have. Um, and we usually hold them out of things, or they're the neutral for the first couple weeks and build them in. But my science in my own head isn't good enough to manage 30 players and 3 people that didn't come in prepared to be perfect in their return to play. So it is on the student athletes to come in prepared, because my management is more for the most prepared. We adjust for the non-prepared, but there's only so much we can do. So we're about 1 or 2 muscle injuries for that, and then we have a return to play protocol, and we use testing of 120s, of 4 to 6 120s in 18 seconds down. We're also at 6,000 feet of altitude. 18 seconds down, 45 seconds back, rest for 15, to see if their muscles are just prepared to train, even as a neutral or whatever that is. So our injuries have gone down. I think a lot of it's also our connection with the student athletes. Like, I had a kid 2 weeks ago walk in and just say, because they know I only believe concussions and spine are the only things that keep you out of absolutely everything. So, she's like, yeah, my quad is just feeling a little tight. I don't think I warmed up enough, because we also have warm up issues, because sometimes it's 5 degrees outside, and so she's like, and a couple ball strikes yesterday didn't feel right. I'm like, all right, this is what we're gonna do. We're going to recreate the session for your part. You're never striking a ball over 10 yards with your laces. Everything's inside the foot. So you're being neutral. You're going to be put in positions that everything you do is short passing. In your sections, you're never going to get to a sprint, because we're going to limit the space you need to cover. And so now she was able to do the training, build back herself, build back her self-confidence in it, build confidence in us that she can tell us something without being punished, right? No one on the team even knew what her new stipulations are. We just changed them. And it ended up, we did it for 2 or 3 days, and by day 4, she was back ready to go. So no real muscle injury or tear. Obviously, in that time, we adjusted her lifting training with the strength and conditioning coach, and then her rehab with the trainers. We also have, if we bought actual at retail, $10,000 worth of Normatec and Hyperice recovery equipment in our locker room for our team alone. So they have everything to get back. And we have TIM machines in our locker room, and we have vibrating rollers and everything.
That's awesome. And just to come back to your injury numbers, I mean, those are pretty good numbers. And I know even just clubs who have 2 ACLs in a month's time. So it's just pretty alarming. And just to have two since you've been there for all those years is really good. And I think a lot of teams get confused when they are doing the strength training, but not the load management. They're like, "Oh my gosh, my girls are so strong, but people are still getting hurt," and they ignore that load management piece. And I wonder if it's because coaches just see it as another full-time job, and they think it's going to be so much time. But can you just explain how you stay on top of it? And I also use Beyond Pulse. I'm about to start using Soccer Pulse as well. And what I like about the technologies is it is very easy for coaches to use, and it does save us time from making Excel spreadsheets and doing crazy calculations. So, can you just get into how you use it in a practical setting, and how it doesn't have to be this beast?
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously, it's our full-time job, but, I mean, half the club coaches get paid more than me, so it's their full-time job also. For me, I'm big on if you're in a leadership role, ignorance is not a choice, right? So, the your resp I think of it as, what North Carolina and Florida State do for their student athletes, I'm responsible to do the same, I just don't have the same budget, so I have to be creative to get there, right? And when I was club in high school, same thing. It might have been an Excel spreadsheet, it might be just a text, whatever. I was still responsible for, understanding their load, whatever that was. Um, I think there's an ego to it. Some places have high school and club going at the same time, and they just refuse to take a day off. Or, which the thing is, I think this is where the education of you don't need a day off. Maybe they come in and work on set pieces and walkthroughs and human not team bonding games, right? And you get something out of it that way. When I was in Phoenix, we were always getting ready for ECL nationals in 118-degree weather. So yes, we were still training, but we would do 5-minute possession exercise, then go sit under a tree and talk about each other's strengths and weaknesses and how we were going to be great, right? So I think there has to be a solution oriented, and you just have to be aware. Like, one of my favorite phrases is, what's the most important ability in sports? And most people get this one wrong. It's availability. If you're not available, it doesn't mean if you have throwing strength, you have kicking, it doesn't matter. If you're not available mentally, physically, emotionally, it doesn't matter, right? So as coaches and leaders, we have to make sure we are setting up resources, whatever that is, human resource, whatever, to make sure they are available. We're blessed that we have a player that got called in last Tuesday to the Puerto Rican national team camp out of nowhere, right? She just transferred here from community college, got called in on Tuesday. Immediately, like, we played this coming weekend, 2 games. I told her, you're not playing the game because you're leaving on Sunday, right? And she's like, "Well, I want to play. I want to prove myself to my teammates." I'm like, "Totally understand that. It's not the best for you because you're playing the Cayman Islands in Puerto Rico, 6 hours away from here, next Wednesday in 7 days. So come, give me 2 hours. I'm going to sit down and recreate your training plan for the next 6 days before you leave." Came in, hey, on the day we play, you are going to do. So one of the questions you asked, like, what was my growth and difference? I used to just call it lactic acid buildup. Like, I didn't know what else it was. So I'm like, whatever builds lactic acid, you're intensely doing. Right. So I was like, Saturday, instead of playing with the team, you're going to do a non contact lactic acid buildup workout. So agility, hard jumping, whatever. Sunday, you're doing this. Monday, and we're going to build for you to get ready, right? So now we lost the kid that's our starting left back for our spring games. It is what it is. Like, we did it in the fall for a kid also, right? So, and now I also, she's still filling out soccer pulse while in Puerto Rico. So I know what her body feels like. So when she gets back next Sunday, I know after I talk to her, meet with her, we will, she has her Beyond Pulse, so she's wearing it there. So I know what her management is when she comes back, and 5 days before we play BYU, for her to be available for the BYU game, we will adjust her workload in relation to distance, intensity, and total time duration for the 5 days coming back from Puerto Rico to deal with acclimation of altitude, weather, because we're dry and cold, and she's coming back from hot and humid. So that even if that means her availability is 15 minutes, and at the BYU game, that it is what it is, right? We don't want her availability to be 60 minutes, but now she's out for 3 months because we tore a muscle, right? And then we will check in with her after we pick a workload. And that workload obviously is also based on the intensity of those 15 minutes, not just purely 15 minutes. I think sometimes when people think of workload, they just think of rudimentary numbers of, well, they can go for 30 minutes. Okay, well, what if they only juggled? Right? Like, so we want to see where she is in the game. Like, BYU plays with 2 strikers. If we play 4 in the back, she's playing left back and never under pressure, and we calculate where she's at, she might be able to go 30 minutes, right? Depending on the intensity of her duration. So I think it's important to be aware of like anything, what's your outcome goal? Your outcome goal is available student athletes that are at the highest performance. Okay. How do you get available student athletes at the highest performance? Understand what they're doing and then adjust so that you have available student athletes at their highest performance.
Now, I'm wondering about when you guys are in season and you have girls that aren't getting as much playing time, maybe not even getting into the game at all. How are you adjusting their training week to get them ready just in case they have to sub in and make an impact?
Yeah, so we use the distance traveled for their position on the weekend, and then we try to replicate that throughout the week. So, for example, Chiaki, our holding mid, averages 12,000 meters a game. So she plays Thursday, Sunday. She's done 24,000 meters, plus the, let's say, 15,000 meters she did on the week for practice. So let's say her workload is 40,000 meters in a week, something of that sort. Well, a kid who's, in the second group isn't getting as many reps throughout the week, plus not playing as much, might only be at 17,000 meters. So we might start the training on Tuesday with non-contact sprinting to get their total workload up. Also starting their heart rate at a higher speed or a higher point than others on the team. And we just use 120s or T-test or whatever. So we might say, let's get that group started at 2,500 to 3,000 meters before practice starts. Then add on to where they are at practice, catching up in total distance, but the intensity. Sometimes we can't replicate the intensity of training because we're deloading kids who played a lot on Tuesday. So sometimes I feel, other people might debate this, that we need to take the ball out so that we can replicate the highest intensity possible, then put the ball in, knowing that the intensity is going to be lower with the ball than it is without the ball, especially with kids who have played a lot on the weekend. So we use the metric of distance plus intensity, and then we replicate it in isolated situations. The day after a Thursday game, the group that played under 45 minutes play small-sided games. So usually, let's say it's 14 people, so 7v7. Usually on a 50-yard field, depending on where we are in the season, seeing how much we want them to travel to arrive to pressure and to get into spaces. And then we usually play 5-minute games, and we play first team to win 3 games. So there's high intensity. We do something like burpees, so it's not a sprint workload on their growings and whatever, but there's a building of you're the expert, but building of lactic acid buildup for the generic term, and then repeating, right? So we monitor as much as possible, but then to be honest, at some point, and there's just the honest truth, when you get deeper in the conference play, we make it more optional because some kids, if they don't believe they'll ever get in, you are now just pushing them for a reason they don't want to. So we make it optional and make ourselves available. So if training's at 1, if someone wants to, we can do 9, 10, 11. We'll come out with you individually in groups. We'll pair it to yourself because then I think it becomes a little more individually motivated. Those last 4 or 5 weeks, if you want to get there, where at the beginning everyone wants to get there and keep them close. And I think that's just the truth of the matter. Some kids just check out in the last 5 weeks. So you're pushing them to be ready. They're not always going to enjoy it. So then it becomes a little more self-motivated.
I like the point you made about doing some isolated work without the ball to reach that higher intensity stimulus, that high speed running stimulus that they're not necessarily getting out of small sided games. And it's good to have both for sure, but definitely for the non-starters to really get exposed to that speed and that max velocity, and also the conditioning side of things. I really like the use of the 120s, and I feel that's like the only time where we should be doing extra conditioning. Sometimes coaches add in the extra conditioning as punishment, and they're actually putting their starters and their non-starters at injury risk. So I'm
Correct.
glad you clarified that.
Yeah, we do most, I would say 99% of anything that has to do with building fitness is at the start of training, when they're the freshest. Um, if we do it later, we know we're not really building fitness, we're building mentality or something else. We don't even think of it as fitness, right? But like punishment wise, I would say on average, our biggest punishment we have is 10 burpees, 5 crunches, two two quick push-ups, right? They know they lost. Give them a quick reminder they lost a small-sided game and move on. Because what ends up happening, to your point, if we do most of our exercises in 1 to 2 minute cycles, so 3v2 for 1 minute, 4v2s for 1 minute. If we're going 6v6 to goal, 4 to 5 minute game. So we create our game model. I can get a lot of buzzwords in today. We create our game model to replicate the intensity of the moment. So we don't need the workout after. We give them a reminder because I think competing's fun and you lost, I won. But if we then do, okay, 10 suicides, and then we're like, all right, let's play again hard. And then you're yelling at the kid for not running the space hard or pressuring hard. That's a you problem. You created an atmosphere that they're not going to do it. Now, if you do it for the purpose of just challenging them mentally to do it, that's your own choice. But be aware that, in the next 48 hours to 72 hours, you're going to have to challenge their soccer in a different way, either technically or tactically, because physically and emotionally, you took all those coins.
You're right, like a few push-ups or burpees, it's not going to hurt, but when it turns into those, like, 20-minute conditioning runs as punishment, it's really taking away from that practice output and actually using that time to accomplish something and be like, "Hey, we messed up in our games over the weekend, so let's figure this out as a team and actually make efficient use of our practice time instead of putting ourselves at a higher injury risk."
Yeah, 100%. I would say one of our worst punishments are we play a game where there's 4 teams, 2 minute games, first to two, and if you lose, you stay on. So if you lost 3 in a row, you might be in there for a while, right? Because you're so tired and you're always playing a fresh team. But when we do that, let's say we play 4v4, we put 6 on a team. So there's still subs and recovery, but we're also like, yeah, every once in a while, it sucks for you. Like, and the other 3 are fine, right? Because they're getting 2 goals in 30 seconds of getting off the field, but we also know at some point, if that team is stuck in there for 25 minutes, that we are no longer training fitness. We have to be aware we can continue this training, but know what the next 2 trainings have to be. Or we stop now, know if we want to do what we want to do the next day. So I think it goes to desired effect and micro and macro, right? Desired effect for the moment, desired effect for the day, and then reanalyze your pre-planned desired effect for the next 72 hours, but take the context of what you did in the last 24 hours and be prepared to adjust.
I love this. This is like a crash course on load management for coaches, and
Nerd
I
alert.
yeah, I mean, it's really inspiring, and I know the US coaching education courses are doing a little bit of a better job talking about load management, tactical periodization. When I took my C license, obviously you're a lot higher than I am. We kind of glossed over it, but they didn't teach us how to use certain technology or what data to look at. They kind of just gave this like general cookie cutter template. Oh, like Tuesday is going to be a medium intensity day, then Wednesday is going to be high intensity. I'm like, well, not all the time.
Match day
So,
-3, match day -2.
yeah,
What does that
exactly.
mean?
It's like no one knows like what they're doing, and it's like we can't always follow the same like universal method that's been put out there by gurus. So, yeah, I just find it interesting. Have you like seen more education coming out as you climb the ladder in your licenses, or is this something we need to really seriously consider putting in these coaching courses?
Yeah, so I got my A when I was 25, back in like '05, and never took another license. I went to I went to Europe and studied. Like I would just call David Tenney from from and just ask him questions and went more for direct information. Here's one of the challenge I think it is, and I think it if you soccer and fitness, let's say we put load management and soccer in a similar realm. It's the same challenge with soccer. So what are now it's getting a little better in soccer, but what is the access to education that most people get? Barcelona, Liverpool, whatever. It's the highest of the highest. And then you, who's a volunteer coach or a 12 coach, have to find a way to make it applicable to your kid. Well, it's the same problem. Who's putting out the most load management information? Master's degrees, people who do studies, and then we're asking someone who has a master's degree, a PhD, who uses Catapult, who uses all this to do education, and then for someone who's a U14 coach who goes in 2 to 3 days a week to figure out how it works for them, right? So I think that's impossible because that's the information that's out the most, right? So I think the trickle down that's happened in soccer, right? Now you see people posting their under 10 training and their under 9 training, right? So there's more information available for the different cycles of age groups. But in workload management, there's only really one, and it's like match days and low and high loads and stuff like that. You're like high load, they're 12. Like they barely have to stretch; they can go run around and they're ready to go. So I think one of the next things that needs to happen is cycle appropriate or age appropriate load management, almost what do they call them, modules, right? Like, okay, this is what load management means for a 10 to 12 year old in general. Whatever, 30 games at 60 minutes or less, right? So either 60 minutes or 30 games or the average of two, you know, 2 a week tops, we get it, this many days. Like take the basics for group one and be aware of it, right? And hey, if your kids play middle school soccer and club soccer, teach the parents how to do math of if they play 10 games there, they can only play 25 with us or whatever that is, and you tell me ahead of time so I'm aware. And then for 14 to 16, 16 to 18 or whatever. And I think that's the most applicable because the people that ask me questions, I'm like, well, your U13 RL team is not going to use what I do. There's something you can use. I'm not a full expert on it, but I would use Beyond Pulse's active participation in distance travel. But even that, you need to figure out what is a load average. And all of it means nothing if you don't adjust information, right? Like it means nothing. So, yeah, let's say, and no one take me for this, but let's say it's 12,000 meters for a 14-year-old to travel in a week, in distance. Okay, well, if they hit 14 on Saturday, then you don't play them on Sunday. If they hit their total distance, right? Or you sub more. You're going to see fresher players that are more available for more things. So I think the next step is creating those modules the way the soccer licenses have gone, and putting experts, right? Sometimes in some of those licenses, the coaching educator is a soccer person that's usually old school and learned the soccer education is learning it this way and is reading a manual on workload management, but doesn't always have used it in an application.
The one problem that I think a lot of people are running into is they also are worried on like sitting a player out because they might lose that Sunday game. So that example you just gave, that if a girl like hits her numbers by the Saturday game and she's at a higher risk playing that much Sunday, it might piss the girl off. She might be like, why can't I play? The parents are going to be like, why can't she play? We're at a college showcase right now. We need to get seen. We need to win. So I think some coaches are trying to do it, but then it's like you're going to end up pissing someone off. And I've talked to a lot of my colleagues about this. If you're doing true load management, sometimes you're going to be the bad guy.
100%. And I think it goes to educating student athletes and their parents, but like you can't just use the word development, it's for development, but have no definition of it, right? Like you have to educate them on why and what are they going to get out of it in the end, right? And let's say you just use distance. Well, if you're prioritizing matches, like for showcases, because I remember doing this with a couple of our, and if people don't know, I've coached youth soccer for 19 years and was in the Development Academy, ECNL, NorCal Premier League, USY, everything. So ODP, but what you start to look at, if you just use distance or, hey, I want this kid to play all 180 on Saturday and Sunday, perfect. Make them the neutral on Tuesday and sit them out of practice on Thursday, or only have them do the first 20 and then be a bumper in a game or shag balls. So learning how to prioritize. Okay, well, this weekend we know we're going to smash these teams. I'm going to end up taking these kids out no matter what. Then you put them in everything that we could practice. And, when you're consistent with your metrics and what you're doing, okay, well, this week for the individual, I am prioritizing the games. Okay, then they're lighter practice. I'm prioritizing practice, lighter in games. For the team, I am prioritizing, I have to do it this week. Exact example. We are going to 2 high-level Pac-12, future Big 12, 8-hour drives to at ASU, at U of A. I can't train that hard this week because I know I'm probably playing 14 players in those games, in both games. U of A, 7 o'clock, Saturday night. ASU, Sunday afternoon, and ASU doesn't play on Saturday. So I know our workload is going to be super high. So every training this week has been under an hour and 15 minutes. The intensity was only within 20-minute brackets. It never went outside of that. So after that, maybe walk through set pieces, throw in juggling games, high five games, whatever. But I worked to start them later and end them earlier, so they mentally saw they got more time back in their day. And I just knew if I want my 2 holding mids to play 180 this weekend, they are not doing much this week, right? They're off on Friday. They were light yesterday. Today they're the neutrals only, so their lactic acid buildup is usually from defending because you're cutting based on the opponent. So we took them out of almost every lactic acid buildup exercise this week because I know they're going to play a lot, but I also know what am I losing? Some intensity prep for them for this weekend. But the goal was we knew that, so we did it 2 and 4 weeks ago. Doesn't mean we're going to win. Just means we're going to be physically prepared for the match.
Mhm. Those are some good examples of how you tweak that intensity, maybe having a neutral player or taking them out of a certain drill that involves a lot of that hard change of direction, target players as well. Is there anything else that you do to manipulate the intensity?
Yes. So I always look at the variables of time. So how long do you do the exercise or score? Playing the 1 makes it really sharp, intense, but shorter. 1-minute games instead of 20-minute games is going to change the intensity. Uh, varying the shape of the field, diamond fields, narrow, wide, in the formation you put them in. So you can see what is the distance traveled someone would max have to spend. So if I play 7v7 on an 80-yard field, people are going to run some distance. If I play 8v8 on a 40-yard field, we're going to challenge them technically and tactically more than we are physically because the distance that travel to the next person isn't very far. The other thing that changes the intensity, which I don't think enough people realize, is the number of balls used in an exercise and the access to them. So we have 50 soccer balls, so we always have access. So our heart rates never go down because we're not chasing one ball to bring it back. We play an exercise called KG style. So if someone's injured or backup goalies or whatever are on all 4 sides of the field. So if a ball goes out on that side, they play a ball back in to the team who's supposed to have the ball. So you play 4 minutes, it's like playing indoor. The ball never goes out, right? So the intensity level never is allowed to drop, or we'll put 40 soccer balls around the field. So if the ball goes out, they get a ball back in quickly. But if we want it to be slower, we would say every ball restarts with the goalie. So no matter where it goes out, it goes back with the goalie. Well, it's going to take the goalie 2 to 4 seconds to get a ball. By that time, people are jogging higher. Everyone's jogging their space, so it's a recovery time, right? So understanding ball number, ball placement, accessibility to ball. Is it start with a goalie? Is it start with regular soccer rules? We're going to take corner kicks, throw-ins. Well, if we're taking corner kicks and throw-ins, are we putting balls in the corner and on the throw-in spot so that we're not spending time chasing balls? Um, are we putting, injured players or someone, a trainer that can pass a ball in or throw it to someone like their ball kids? So understanding accessibility to balls, number of balls, variation of balls, where they are, I think has to do with workload because it has to do with the intensity, the heart rate, having a chance to recover or drop, or does it stay high due to the ball always getting back into play quicker?
Oh, I'm so glad you talked about the availability of the soccer balls. I think that's like so overlooked in terms of raising or decreasing the intensity of the drill. And if a team's chasing a soccer ball, like 30 seconds can go by and everyone's just kind of like recovering. But like you said, if it's constantly in play, that really gets the heart rate up. And then it also is great for the cognitive component and just constantly keeping their mind on a swivel and not fatiguing there. So there's just so many benefits to that. And I think a lot of coaches tend to ignore that piece when designing small sided games.
Well, and I would look at like an example of, let's say you have 15 players, youth sports, 15 players, 10 balls. I think that's a reasonable uh, number. Well, you look at the difference of playing 7v7 with a sub and chasing soccer balls, or 5v5 with a third team out helping getting balls back in, right? You lose 4 players. Okay, well, then shrink the field size from 60 by 40 to 40 by 30. You're in general the same tactical situation, 5v5 and 7v7, but now balls are coming back in quicker and you play 3 to 4 minute games. So you're at a 1 to 2 work to rest ratio, 2 to 1 work to rest ratio. You play two, you're off one. So they're recovering. They're helping get balls in. So the intensity of the exercise now goes up because balls are coming back in. The intensity of the exercise goes up because they're playing for 6 minutes, 2 3 minute games, and they're out for 3 minutes. So now the intensity starts to replicate the game at, even in 5v5. Or you play 7v7 on a 6v4 field, chase soccer balls, and you play for 7 minutes. But I guarantee in that same, your distance might be better because depending on your field size, but I guarantee your intensity will probably go down just by chasing balls because you only have 10.
Oh, this has been so good. And I do want to shift gears and get into the recruiting side and what you do at your university. I planned like half this episode load management, half recruiting, but I get carried away with load management because I'm just so interested in what you're doing. But let's get into recruiting. So you're playing in a competitive conference, Division 1. What types of players are you looking for in your program, and how do you do your recruiting? Mainly showcases, ID camps, video? Just fill us in.
Yeah, so we have a couple phrases: competitive and athletic, work hard and listen. Right. So that's something we look for. A phrase I like to use is functionally dominant. So, especially in female student athletes, if you ask them, what don't you do well? They'll give you like 10 things. If you ask them, what do you do well? They're like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, then why am I going to put you on the field? If you don't know, right? Because everyone's always done IDPs or like get only has to do with getting better at what you stink at, right? So the phrase I always ask student athletes, there's 15 minutes to go in a conference tournament game where they're tied 1-1, up 1-0, down 1-0. Why are you on the field? And if you don't have that answer, why do you want to play? Like, maybe it's a long throw. Maybe you're fast. Maybe you have a great final ball. Maybe you can head a ball. Maybe you can cross a ball. What is your dominant feature that helps you win games, right? So that's something I look for. My controversial phrase: "There's a place for jack of all trades." Usually, in the last 15 minutes of the game, they get beat by specialists. So I think it's important to understand and have the abilities of all the soccer skills, but I think there's also important on what do you rely on at the highest moment of your game, and let that shine. We recruit everywhere. I look at our roster because I do quality control analysis on how we spend our money, on how we went recruiting and what we got out of this event or this event. We have players from ODP regional camp, ODP, Utah youth soccer high school games alone, Utah games, ECNL, GA, uh, old DA. We have them from every single spot. We have junior college, we have international junior colleges and internationals. So one of our goals is diversity, and I think diversity and experience is huge. We have players on our team from Japan. We have two from Japan. We have Toronto, Canada, and we have someone from Cedar City from here. Right? We're from Utah. We have players that are married since their sophomore year and live with their husbands. We have, people from SoCal. We have everything on our roster, and I absolutely love it. Right. So I don't believe you can win with 4 or 5 people from the same team because I think they bring in too much of the same. I think to maximize experience, there has to be diversity. Right. Our half of our team, if you look at some of the biggest clubs in the country, and we have some of those kids here, half of our team have never heard of those club teams because they're from Japan. So the name Slammers or Dallas Texans doesn't mean anything to them. So instead, but in converse, Osaka Japan means nothing to our kid from SoCal, right? So instead of coming in with predetermined opinions of each other, they have to ask each other. They're required to talk to each other or find out about each other because they're not born 10 minutes away from each other. So does that create rifts and challenges? Yeah, because you're not playing with someone you grew up with, you're playing with someone you are different than. So therefore you are challenged to grow in those experiences. So yeah, I like the phrase there's never a never and never an always. So, oh, do you never recruit from high school? No, not never. Do you always recruit from ECNL and GA? No, there's not an always. So when we find them, for us, we do a lot in our region, Region 4, so Colorado West, just recruiting dollar wise. But we've had a kid from Florida. We have a kid coming from Ohio. We have a kid coming from Guelph, Toronto, Canada. What most of those were, we have a kid coming from New Zealand this year. It was a buddy I knew that put their name on them, plus video, plus experience, plus we just test everyone for behavioral testing. We watch video, we do everything, and then we see if they're a good fit. And sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong.
No, I'm curious in terms of the type of person you recruit because I think character is another thing that we don't talk about a lot in the recruiting process. I know you mentioned that you have a really diverse team and girls from all over, but what type of character are you really looking for in recruits?
Yeah, so accountability is a big phrase for me. So even on the soccer field, okay, you crossed the ball out of bounds 3 times. Okay, what did you do Monday? Did you go back in, train 10 minutes before practice? That's cool. That checked the box. Did you do it the next 10 Monday, Wednesdays? That's accountable, right? You know, I was 18 to 22. Did you make a mistake off the field? Don't hurt yourself, don't hurt someone else, and don't post it on social media and never do it again. It's that's my simple thing and be accountable. We had a couple kids make a mistake this week, um, and they called me or texted me at 9:30 at night and said, "Can we talk to you tomorrow?" Sure. Came in. They were sitting on my couch before I got here, waiting for me. They I always believe it's usually 80% of the truth if they come out early with the information. So they told me a lot, and I was like, all right, here's your, um, you know, disappointment in where we are in our team values. Here's your whatever punishment, your accountability to what you're going to do next, and don't do it again. You didn't post it. In the end, you might have emotionally hurt someone. You didn't physically hurt someone. You didn't physically hurt yourself. You didn't post it, right? And never do it again. And you were accountable. I heard it from you before I heard it from anyone else. I can live with it. Second time, we're in a whole different meeting, right? So I think accountability for me is key. But I'm also like, I mean, I'm not from like the hood or whatever, but I did grow up in Los Angeles, in the 80s and 90s, and I've seen some people come out and Tyson Chandler, Tayshaun Prince, Compton Dominguez, Tyson Chandler was in a gang, and next thing you know, he's a multi-zillionaire in the NBA and turned his life around. So, you know, I have a 2 and 4-year-old, and they've been reading a book. We're all different. We're all the same. right? So I've taken chances on kids with a 2.5 and whatever, and it's like, okay, why did you have a 2.5? Well, my dad left me, like my parents split, this happened, cool. What did you do about it? I've been battling back. I got a job, so I miss club practice. I go Thursdays. I train with a local team when I can. All right, all right. Now I can't take 6 of those, you know. But like, are we aware of our situations? Do whatever. It doesn't matter if you're the highest character kid. You can move away from home and screw up a lot of things. You know, do what you have as your weakness on the field and off the field. Do we have the resources to manage to develop those? And what you do well off the field and on the field, do we have the environment to enhance them? Is what we look for.
Wow, I wanna play for you guys.
Come on over.
Yeah, it sounds like a really great culture and in alignment with what I also preach to my athletes, and I definitely want people to follow up with you and ask questions or leave a comment on this video if you wanna ask Kai more, but this has been such a great conversation, and Kai, where can everyone find you?
Yeah. Well, before I answer that, I want to go on something you just ended with is a great culture. I believe a lot of people lie about what great culture is. People think great culture is when everything goes right, right? And then they lie and fake, hey, we're all sisters. There's no way 30, 18 to 22-year-old all like each other. It's just not possible, right? I'm big on a great culture is you are honest, upfront, and accountable. There's 3 type of people on your team. The people that when you finish playing with, you'll never talk to again. There's people on your team. I'm old. We call them Facebook friends. You keep up on Facebook. You run into them in the grocery store. You like that. You have no problem with them. You're just good. There's people you go to weddings with, weddings for. I had those on my national championship team, right? I think that's a great culture is understanding those. Forcing everyone to be friends is not a great culture. That's just checking a box for admin and recruits to be like, oh, you have a great culture. It seems like no, no. People come in and like, I saw your 2 players having a go at each other. Yeah, they were holding each other accountable, right? And one didn't like it. And then what they did after that, they met with 2 other mediators on the team to have a chat. We give them an article on crucial conversations, understanding how to have peer-to-peer review, the hardest thing. That's a great culture for me. And it's not, hey, I just make everything look like everyone's happy. No, like I have a great culture with my wife. We're not always happy. So don't fake it. Like be real. So that's my quick great culture hack.
Kai,
On
I feel
Friday,
like we can do a whole other podcast on culture, but you're actually segueing into an episode I'm about to do next week with another strength coach, and we're going to talk about this and how you don't have to be best friends with your team, but you should get along and you should respect other people for their differences and things you don't agree with. And it's okay. Like we can all be good and still have conversations, even though we don't see eye to eye on everything. It's not possible as long as you're on a soccer team, as long as you live on planet Earth as a human
100%.
being. So I'm so happy you mentioned that. Like I need to have you back on.
My phrase, I did a presentation 2 years ago at the convention, and I was blessed. Couple people in there, and I got a lot of good buddies. And I said something in there, and I was like, I got very few friends. I got a lot of acquaintances, and you can see people like, no, no, we're friends. I'm like, we ain't friends until we go through something. If we haven't gone through something and we haven't argued or fought or we ain't we're acquaintances, and there's nothing wrong with that. I got a lot of acquaintances. Twyla Kaufman, our former national team coach, current interim, me and her got into it when we were the 2 hot shots in SoCal in 2007 to 2009. She was the assistant at Pepperdine. I was the assistant at UC Santa Barbara. We got into it. Like, cuss, we didn't cuss each other, but I mean, thought everything. Didn't talk to each other for like 2 years. Like, went after each other. Became best of friends because what we looked at each other and said, when you had a problem with me, you came and said it. When I had a problem with you, came and said it. Those are the people I trust. Those are friends. Those get Christmas cards. Acquaintances don't get Christmas cards. We got to go through some shit to be friends. So that's my how we keep it real. But you can find me on
And
Instagram
yeah,
or Twitter.
and Twitter, right? That's how I
Yeah,
found you.
Instagram or Twitter, Kai Edwards 13. Follow SU Soccer. We're on a constant battle. We're not the top of the heap. We're not the bottom. So we're always in a grind and a battle, and that's okay. Um, so we pull off some quality results. Sometimes we go backwards, but we will always keep going. So check us out, follow us, and know that what comes from us at SU and me is real. It's not fake. I show video clips of us kicking it out of bounds because guess what we did, right? That's who we are. Like, but sometimes we'll bury a beautiful goal. So that's who we are. And thank you very much. This was awesome.
Thank you, Kai. And everyone, we hope you enjoy this episode, and I will see you next time.